I was at a seminar recently, and a trainer named David Bear, a great mindset trainer, asked the audience a question. He said, how many of you, or how much time do you typically spend in a suffering state compared to a beautiful state? So what's the suffering state? Well, it's being in fear or anger, sadness, guilt, worry, anxiety, wondering how am I going to pay the bills, or what's going to happen in my relationships, or not having the energy you want, maybe the physical vitality, and there's suffering associated with that. So I invite you to consider the same question. How much of your time, how much of your average day is spent in a suffering state compared to a beautiful state, which would be happiness, joy, peace, gratitude, and so on? It was interesting when he asked that question, I saw the responses for a couple reasons. The first thing is that for myself, I was pleasantly surprised because of some processes and work that I had done on myself over many years, that I found that I actually don't spend much time in a suffering state. Maybe 30 minutes a day at most. Some days not that. Some days maybe a little bit more if I'm really working on something and getting a little stressed out about it. Certainly, if I'm in LA traffic, I probably spend a little more time in a suffering state. But the thing is, years ago, back in 2013, there was a time where I was in a depression, and it's like pretty much every waking moment was in somewhat of a suffering state. And I felt like my life was directionless. Felt like it was meaningless. I felt like even though I had achieved some success in my business, it didn't make any difference. I don't make any difference. I don't matter. What does my life matter? And I spent time in that depression. And then years before that, as I look back, there are times where I was going through anxiety, constant anxiety and obsessive compulsive. And I look back at my life at the journey that I had taken, and I realized that so much of the work that I had done had stemmed from basically two things. And one of it was my own work of how do I overcome this anxiety or these feelings of apathy or depression or some of these different challenges that I was going through. Whatever I was trying to do in my business or my personal development was really about overcoming and releasing a lot of those emotions, as well as a lot of the limiting beliefs like I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, or I can't make any money, or all of those other things that were holding me back. I spent many years going and searching for what's the best way to release these negative emotions and release these limiting beliefs. I also look back and I go, a big reason I got into it was as a kid, I wanted to be a role model. I wanted to share with people the things that I had discovered that worked. That's always been a part of my personality. So I teach health and fitness because I figured it out, and then I want to share it with others. And I also remember a big motivator for me was seeing my mom in her suffering states after my parents got a divorce. I remember seeing the pain that she went through and feeling so helpless, like I couldn't do anything. Like I want to have the words, I want to have a way, a resource to help her. And I felt so powerless as a kid growing up through that I believe that played a large role in why I spent so much of my life studying psychology and studying emotional intelligence, and how can I help people who are going through that suffering, whether it's me or someone else that's going through a state of suffering. So that led me on my journey. That's how I've discovered some of the techniques and processes that I have. And what I found by going through one particular process was that it goes through releasing different negative emotions from the past, and it goes to the root cause. Now, it doesn't matter if you don't know what the root cause is, but it goes to essentially the root cause through active imagination and completely releases all the built up emotions. I release guilt through this process. I don't know where I got the guilt from, but I felt a tangible, visceral release, and it has not come back. It's incredibly powerful, and I'm not one to hype things up. I certainly am skeptical about things. I go, well, how much of that's just like a placebo effect, or is there really some scientific backing? And there is backing to these techniques. And I just say that for me, though, the firsthand experience is powerful. What was even more powerful was helping at a workshop where we do this with my business partner who's trained in these different techniques. He's had years in health and studying coaching and different psychological modalities. We took a group through this process, and there's a veteran there. And he was not into personal development. He was there, basically his wife brought him along. And he's, let's just say, a little skeptical about this. But we asked, who in the audience has anger that they'd like to let go of. He said he's been carrying anger for 40 years. He couldn't ever remember a time where he didn't have anger. So he got up and we took him through one of the processes that we do. And this is, once again, someone who's not expecting much to come out of this. He comes out and it's a look of like shock and getting some tears in his eyes. One of the things that happens as he releases the emotions, sometimes it goes into a different emotion, as the anger goes away. Now he's feeling even some sadness from the experience. And his words after that, I quote, were just, "No shit." And he looked there with this stunned look on his face. And he said he's been holding on to anger for 40 years and it was just gone in about 10 minutes. Now, you share this and some people are rightfully skeptical. They're like, how can that happen? It can't happen that quickly. Well, I'll just say this, when it comes to releasing emotions, if you've ever been worried about someone, oh, are they okay? And then as soon as you find out that they're okay, the emotion is released, right? So transformation like that can happen in an instant. It can happen very quickly. Now, creating new habits, new neural pathways, laying down myelin sheath in your nerves, and learning to play guitar, that takes time to install. But when it comes to actually releasing deep emotions, especially if you go back to the root event in your unconscious mind, it can release and it can stay gone and have a very, very powerful, lasting, really permanent effect. And so that's why I was excited about this. When I experienced it for myself, but when I saw the benefits that it had for other people, that's when I was like, okay, I really need to get the message out there. Because I've been doing a lot of business coaching and fitness coaching, but I'm like, more people need this, especially those who might be carrying around some really heavy emotional burdens from past experiences, and they need to get access to this. And of course, anyone watching, if you need to see a therapist, please see a therapist. What I'm offering are coaching techniques that work on emotions and limiting beliefs that can help with this, and wanting to make sure it's available to anyone who can get it. So how does this work? Well, I'm going to give a really quick rundown of it. It's based off of Gestalt therapy. Gestalt is essentially when one significant emotional event compounds over time to others. So here's a practical example. Have you ever seen someone get road rage? Or have you ever experienced that? And it's like, yes, there are some things that can be irritating. Maybe they get cut off, but the reaction and their anger is so overblown. Why is that? Well, they're not actually reacting to what's happening in that moment. They're reacting to all the built up events that have happened over their life that have built up anger. So they might be thinking, this person doesn't respect me, they don't care about me. Unconsciously, they're associating that to the time when they were 5 years old and someone disrespected them and they felt hurt, or whatever it is. So when we release these emotions, we get to root cause and we release it on all the events that have happened since then. Now what happens is you can still feel emotions. It's a good thing to feel emotions. You'll still feel appropriate anger and sadness and fear, guilt, so on and so forth, but it won't be built up. It won't be extra. And a lot of times you find that you're much more at peace, much more at ease, and you're simply responding to what shows up in the moment with an appropriate amount of emotion. And this is important because let's take an emotion like fear. I was reading the book, The Gift of Fear, which is a great book, and it talks about a woman who was scared every time, I'm paraphrasing this off the top of my head, I believe it was when she was going to her car, either before or after work or something like that. And she always felt fear when she did that. And what it turned out to be on a deeper level was actually she didn't like her job, and there's some psychological things that happened there. But the interesting thing that the author noted, Gavin the author noted that when you have that, if a person has that constant state of fear, they're actually in more danger. Because think about it. If a person's constantly in fear, they don't actually know and get the signal when something really is wrong. Now compare that to someone who's generally at peace. They're going through their life, they're walking to their car, but then all of a sudden, out of the ordinary, they go, something doesn't seem right. See, because they're not used to feeling that fear, and then now all of a sudden they feel it, they're now more in touch with their emotions and their intuition, and they actually go, okay, if I'm feeling fear, even though I'm not quite sure why it's coming up, I need to pay attention. I need to be on guard. Maybe I need to go back and go back inside. Something seems wrong. Have you ever had that experience where you've trusted your intuition or your intuition was telling you something like, I don't know what it is, something just seems off, and it turns out your intuition was, protecting you from something. Well, we want to be in touch with our emotions for that purpose. What we don't want is to be carrying around all the burden from the past and have unwarranted, unnecessary, extra emotional burden that is causing overreactions to things. So the benefit of some of these processes is that we go root cause. It's more or less permanent, and you don't have to get into the story. You don't have to know what the root cause is. Something could have happened to a person when they were being born or when they were a year old that caused a significant emotional event or buildup. You don't have to remember it. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to go into it. It's all good. It's just through the process of active imagination that you get your unconscious mind to get in touch and release the emotions. And ultimately, this is a process that you do. I'm a facilitator of different processes. You can go to people that can facilitate different psychological processes, but it's ultimately on you to choose to release the emotion, so you choose to release it or not. And I give this as an example. It's like forgiveness, right? Have you ever had the experience where you've forgiven someone and you feel like, the weight's off your back? Right. Well, who did that? Did someone say forgive them and do something to you, or did you simply make that choice? Right. So as a facilitator, guide you through processes that help you get in touch with the emotion and release it. Or actually, you don't even really need to get in touch with the emotion. You simply use active imagination to release the emotion, and you test it and you go, is it still there? Do I still feel it? And many people, after about 10 to 15 minutes of this, will find that the emotion's gone and it stays gone, and they can live out their lives now in a state of greater emotional freedom from that point forward. So another big benefit, as you can see, is it can happen fairly quickly. Once you're set up going through the process, usually can get through most of the negative major emotions within an hour or two. And if there's some additional limiting beliefs or things about that, can go through it. So that's the gist of some of the things that I can help facilitate with, some of the things that at the live events that we do. And I want to make this accessible. I was thinking about this and I go, there's some people out there who really need this. They've had some serious negative emotional events in their life. I know some people personally that have gone through that I want to help. And I said, okay, normally a session would be $500, and that's standard. If you can make that investment, great. But here's the thing. If you really need this, just send me a message. Let me know what you're going through, and I'm going to work out something on a sliding scale that is basically what can you afford. If you can pay it forward, if you can spread the word, if you can offer a testimonial, if you can help others in some way, I'm willing to work on that. It's not going to be about the money for me when it comes to this particular process. If you really need some help, if you really need some emotional release. So please get in touch if you feel that you need this, and I will work with you, and we'll figure out something that will work, that you can afford, even if it's much less than that. And then, of course, if you do have the financial resources to come to one of our events, or you want some more in-depth coaching, and you would like to make a donation to help fund other people who might not be able to afford it, open to talking about that too. So wherever you're at, please, if you feel like this is something that can benefit you, get in touch with me. So it's info@excuseproof.com. We'll work something out. I'll make sure you get this. I'm willing to volunteer some of my time for people who've gone through a serious event. I mean, there's veterans, there's women out there who've gone through sexual abuse, emotional abuse, men out there as well who've gone through traumatic experiences. And I believe this world's going to be a better place if we can really get through some of these deep core level traumas and significant emotional events and start to heal that, and what kind of difference that can make in the world. That's part of what I'm committed to. And so I want to make sure that you get access to it if you feel called to it. This is Derek. Once again, you can reach out to me, info@excuseproof.com. I'm wishing you the best. Take care.